how did you get your request for service or inspection? Did the office send it out, or the ranchers, or sheriff's offices?
For what? I didn't
The
really.
the the request for an investigation, somebody reporting stolen
Oh,
cattle, or requesting you to do an
90%
inspection.
of it was I would get from the area, from people. The ranchers or somebody would call me and tell me that they had a problem on that place down there north of Aspermont and describe the deal and who all's out there, or come and give me a name or two, and you just go from there down there and investigate that. And I sheriff would call you sometimes that he had a problem and want you to come by and look at it. And then just like an stray animal, I got into that several times. You'd have to stray something because they had run all the resources out and couldn't find the owner, and somebody was always branding something and didn't have it recorded, and that's against the law. And but I would help the sheriff maybe estray him. He's got to go through, as quite a deal to estray an animal legally. And nowadays, instead of selling him on the courthouse steps, why, as the law says, you can take him to auction barn and sell him and bring the money back, and then the county can take the money and pay this old boy that he was on his property a little bit for his grass and feed, and then the rest of it goes in an escrow account for a year, and a year later nobody can prove ownership to it. It goes to help the jury fund, pay the jury fund. But did quite a bit of that kind of stuff, but most of the cow theft investigations, the rancher or sheriff would call you, and then I worked lots of shipments on the railroad, people shipping cattle on the train, and I'd leave penny postcards, self-addressed penny postcard. There's no such thing now, but I'd just come by the depot agent's little building at Truscott and leave him 10 or 12 cards, and I'd get a card in the mail. It wouldn't divulge anybody's name, so it wouldn't be spreading your business, but it'd just say 10 cars May the 1st. And I'd know somebody had ordered 10 cars May the 1st at Truscott they're going to load cattle, and I could show up there and see them cattle. And as I told you earlier today, at several times coming off of wheat in the spring, I could catch that train at Crowell and work a shipment of somebody loading yearlings there, and then beat the train to Truscott, and they'd have a bunch there, and then to Benjamin, and then on to Hamlin. And one day on that one train, Santa Fe, everybody wanted to ship by Santa Fe because they took better care of your cattle in them days on the railroad. But
what was your most memorable cattle theft that you worked, or saddle theft? Your criminal investigation?
Oh, it'd be several that and one of the easiest ones I'll say was down here at Stanford, and I pulled in the filling stations about 11 o'clock one night and got out like you're riding, and I was stiff and stretching, and they had a young man come out then that would fill your car with gas and clean your windshields, And then walking around on that other aisle over there was a round puddle of blood, and I wouldn't do this now, but I stuck my finger in it, and it was warm. And I asked this kid, I said, "What does blood come out of?" And he called, and I can still call the name, but he called an old boy's name, just filled up here a few minutes ago, and that he lived over somewhere around Haskell. And I went to Haskell at midnight and got Garth Garrett up. He was the sheriff, and told him, and he knew that guy and said he had a little farm out there. And we drove out there a little ways and turned the lights off, and we could see lights on in the back of that house, and walked up there at the back, and that old boy had a quarter of beef on the kitchen table, was cutting it up to package and put in the deep freeze, and we picked him up and started talking to him, and he told us he shot him in a little feed pen right there on the north side of Stanford back there in that brush, and cut a hind quarter out of him and left the rest. We went over there, and the rest of him was laying there, and I called that fellow's name was Archie Pardue that owned the deal. He used to have a little ranch there at Stanford, and so we had him, but that was one of the easiest ones I was ever involved in. Them boys are so much better educated in law enforcement and everything now, those inspectors, than most of guys. You take like this Alan Jeffries that I talked about, he didn't have any law enforcement. Let me tell you, if we have another cow theft thing that happened in your area, and I'll tell it brief. But there was a fella come to the sale barn at Seymour. There used to be a sale barn there where the highway turned to go to to Throckmorton, right there in Seymour, and it was a local auction. Every Friday, say, was a sale. And there was a fella come there on February the 3rd. I don't remember what year, but it was one of them that I was working in. Introduced himself to them and bought 2 yearlings and had them to call the bank at Jacksburg to verify the check for them 2 yearlings, and the bank verified it. But what he had done, he had come to Jacksburg earlier that morning and opened an account with $300, and these 2 yearlings cost $180 something, I think, in the name of Jess Dale. And he come back on the 10th, a week later, and they shook hands with him and told Mr. Dale, "We're glad to see you, glad to have you back." And he bought a truckload of cattle, and that's all the money he had. And they just gave him a check on that Jacksburg bank, and we was about 18 months finding out who that was. And his name was Frank Barfield, and he is in his 60s, had been to the pen twice, involved in horse and cow thefts, one time in New Mexico on a sheep theft thing. But we finally got him picked up and had him back there in jail at Seymour. And this Russell, what's the boy's name that got the Golden Spur Award the other day?
Joel Nelson.
Huh? Yeah, Nelson. His daddy was the deputy, and they lived in the jail at Seymour, and his mother cooked for the prisoners. So I had this old boy in jail. I'd go by there and see him. He wanted me to bring him a Bible and a bunch of stuff, because he had repented. And this Nelson was a little 10-year-old boy. He played around out there in the yard at the jail. Me and him talked about it at Lubbock the other day when he was getting that award, and he remembered me stopping there. But they sent that old boy to the pen. That's just a sideline that this Nelson fellow lived in the jail. At that time, every place in my district, just about, the sheriff lived in the jail, and his wife cooked for the prisoners, and they fed them when they was eating, it's just, but there's hardly, I don't guess, any of these jails that I know of now where the sheriff lives in the jail and his wife cooks for the jail, you know.
Was the King County Jail operating when you were working?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had two old boys in jail at Dickens in 62 on a cow theft thing, and they climbed up a pipe in that old jail and scrooched out a hole. It climbed out on top of the jail and slid down a pipe and stole a pickup that was there. And they called me, and Nelda and I had been married about 2 months, and we lived in Paducah, and so they called me, and I got Jimmy Jack Fields, the cowboy at the Pitchforks, to meet me at the north camp with a horse at about 1 in the morning, and I went a horseback out there. They had a bundle field, and that's when they shocked them bundles, and them looked like little teepees, and I figured them guys was in one of them shocks, you know, 'cause we found the pickup. They had abandoned it, and the gun was still in it. So, but we found one of them, to shorten the story, laying under that cattle guard that we had drove backwards and forth over all night, and he was nearly froze. It was snowing and really cold, and the other one got away, and we couldn't find him. And we throwed in the towel, and everybody went home and started over tomorrow. And late tomorrow evening, and he traveled from the north camp and crossed 4 Mile Hill and the river and down and come out on the highway down there about where that bar used to be now. It wasn't there then. That late the next evening, and he was cold, and he didn't have any socks on, had slippers, and his feet was froze. And flagged the car down and asked them to bring him to the jail here at Guthrie. And they brought him up here, and we unloaded him and got him there.
Did the old Dickens County Jail, were they still using those cells that are around there up?
Yeah,
that
and they still
have the hangman's platters out in front of them?
I guess I haven't been in there. Last time I was in there was 1.5 years ago. I was up there and still the same. And then, but they talked about this one when Dub Holler was sheriff down here, and this is in the early, while I was an inspector. Had 2 old boys in jail, and they'd own King County now. But to my knowledge, nothing happened, because people looked at it then like, well, they shouldn't have been in jail. But there's 2 of them old boys, and we throwed them back at Dub. I say, we throwed them in that back cell. There's 2 cells down there. And they kept hollering, because him and his wife lived in there in the other part. They was freezing back there, and he turned the heater on high with a blower, blowing toward that cell, and just shut the door and went in there and went to bed. And one of them died, suffocated, and the other one, they got him to Paducah and nailed him. My wife was working at the hospital in the bookkeeping office, and she remembered him. They revived him and saved him. But that other boy, and now, you know, if you throw the guy in jail and something like, it'd be a big time problem for the county and for the sheriff and there. But I don't remember any problem about it. People just then thought he shouldn't have been in jail, you know. And but that boy died there in that cell.